Now, Richard Hanania and Chris Caldwell do get at this a bit in their books. But I think that's the core, and that provides you with a foundation. Now, it's then true that the radical
All right. I mean, it's 105 and I'm only seeing two people. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's assume things beyond control is occurring. Let's wait another few minutes and then I'll start. Yeah, I just noticed I've been muted for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Oh boy. All right, let's start over. Right. I was trying to explain again is the setup of the convergent muscle from last time, just to make sure we're all on the same page. The idea of the convergent muscle is that, well, first of all, I'd mentioned that muscles, in order to cause movement to occur, have to be attached to two separate bones. One bone that moves and one bone that does not move. The bone that does not move is called the origin. Right? So that bone doesn't move. And the bone that moves when the muscle contracts is called the insertion. Right? And that is how, of course, you move your body part. With the convergent muscle, the fascicle starts out as a broad band, right, on the origin. Right? The broad band doesn't all have to be attached to the exact same bone, but the idea here is whatever bone it is attached to, it will not move when the muscle contracts, okay? So because of that, now you have fascicles running at different angles down towards your tendon. And your tendon, of course, goes to the insertion, which has to be one bone, right? So your base at the origin can go to multiple bones, but none of those are going to move. And then all the fascicles run down and eventually attach to your insertion, and that is going to be one bone which does move. You're not going to get multiple bones moving at the insertion, right? And I also said it last time that the angle of the fascicles is determined, of course, by this. You have the fascicle starting out as a broad base on multiple bones potentially, and all coming down to attach to a single tendon, which leaves you with this sort of seashell shape or fan shape if you prefer, right? And depending on what part of the muscle is contracted, you get different motion. For example, if you contracted the fascicles at the upper part here of your muscle, this here is the pectoralis muscle. Pectoralis major, because it's the biggest muscle in the pectoral region. So if you look here on the little man, you can see the broad base here, and this pectoral muscle is attached to multiple ribs. So if you contract the muscles up near the top rib, you pull on the humerus here, which is the insertion, and you cause the arm to move up, right? Whereas if you pull down here instead, you cause your arm to move down and towards your body, right? So by contracting different fascicles, you cause different movements of the same body part. That's why the convergent muscle is so important. You can get multiple movements out of the same muscle. You don't need separate muscles for each movement, right? So remember now, the best example of this one is your pectoralis major. This is the pectoralis major, and it's major because it's the biggest one, okay? Then now, so as we say, convergent muscles, a broad area converges on attachment site, which is normally a tendon or aponeurosis, which I'll speak about later, or a raphe, which is basically connective tissue, but we'll talk about that later as well. Now, pennate muscles. I don't know if you've ever heard the term pennate before, but pennate refers to feathers, okay? So when something is pinnate, it is feather-like. What does that mean? Feathers have a main vein running down the middle of them. And the ability to, what do they call them? Flechettes. I can't remember the exact term for them. But they have the little barbed areas coming off of that main vein. It almost looks like the leaf of a banana, right? So pinnate muscles look sort of like that, all right? So the main vein in this case is going to be your tendon. And the muscle fibers are going to come off of the tendon at an angle, right? So here we have the tendon, obviously. And here are our muscle fibers coming off. And they're all coming off at the same angle for this one here, right? So and that over here, once again, here we have our tendon that runs up through the middle. And once again, we have our muscle fibers attached at an angle. And for the most part, they're all running at the same angle, even if they're running on opposite sides, right? So the pennate muscles are going to be named based on how many sides you have, right? So obviously this one over here is only one side you have alone. This one has two sides of muscles. This one here actually has three. If you're paying attention, you can see the tendon is in three parts, right? So we're doing this based on a number of sides of muscle we have. The best example, well, let's not say best example. The first one here is called a unipennate muscle. Uni, of course, means one. So it's one-sided, right? Hence, it is unipennate. Candice, your mic is on. You're not your mic, video. The next one.
Office.
Sorry, Claudia, I meant, not Candice. The next muscle here
5 South Street
is bipennate.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because once again, it has two sides. As you know, bi means two, right? So this is unipennate. And that one is bipennate. Now, I'm pretty sure y'all have figured out the name of the last one by now. We got uni, we got bi. So obviously the last one is going to be multi-pennate. Because you have more than two sections of muscle, right? We'll just say multi. All right, now you're going to need, of course, to have examples of each one of these types. So your unipennate muscle example is going to be your extensor digitorum. Now, the nice thing about a lot of muscles is that if you know the name of the muscles, it also tells you what the muscle does, which is helpful, right? So if you have an extensor muscle, it causes extension. Now, extension, you're moving a body part further away from your torso normally, right? So this one causes extension, and it is also called digitorum, as in digits. So what does this muscle do? It extends your digits, so your fingers. What does that mean? It means it causes your hand to open. When you open when you make a fist and open the fist up, your extensor digitorum muscles are the ones causing you to open up your hand to see your palm, right? And that is unipennate muscle. Then now, we have the rectus femoris. The rectus part is a little more difficult to track down, but it normally refers to something towards the front. And femoris is, of course, related to femur. So in the rectus femoris, which is bipinnate, we're looking for something on the front or near the front of the femur, okay? So D here, for example, is your rectus femoris, right? It runs the length of the femur, and it's towards the front of the femur. I should mention here the extensor digitorum is right here. Now, for the most part, the muscles that control the opening and closing of your hand are not in the hand. They're going to be in your forearm. This is the reason why when people break their forearm, they have a hard time using their hands because they would have damaged on those muscles as well. Right? So if you've ever seen somebody in a cast because they've damaged their forearm in some way, normally say, boy, they can't write, they'll use the other hand and all kind of things. That's the reason why. Because the muscles that open and close your hands are in your forearm. They are not in your hands themselves. The muscles in your hands have a very fine control. So when you're writing, for example, you're using a combination of these muscles to write. So you're using the extensor digitorum and the flexor digitorum, which of course closes your hands, and these little finer muscles of the phalanges in order to write, okay? Anyway, so remember, extensor digitorum, unipinnate, forearm muscle, rectus femoris, bipinnate. This one is runs along the femur, right? Now the multipinnate muscle now, because it has multiple parts, this one can actually help to pull in multiple directions, right? But this muscle is also pretty strong. Now we find this one here in E, and that is the deltoid muscle. I'm sure everybody knows where the deltoid is, right? At least I hope so. Nobody assumes so. We'll check later and see. But the deltoid muscle is multipinnate. And that one also assists in the moving of your forearm. So the deltoid muscle and the pectoralis muscle over here are working together to help you move your arms around, okay? All right, so that's pinnate muscle for you, right? So remember, we've done parallel muscles. All the muscle fibers are running in the same direction, right? So when they pull, they all pull in the same direction. So they're relatively strong. They tend to shorten up to 30% of their length when they contract, which means they're great at pulling, right? Then you have your convergent muscles. Remember, starts out as a broad band on your origin, ends in a one tendon on the insertion, and can cause movement at multiple angles over the same joint. Then we have our pinnate muscles. These ones sort of look like feathers. There are three types. Unipinnate, with all the muscle fibers on one side of a tendon. Example, of course, is the extensor digitorum. You have bipinnate, muscle fibers on either side of the tendon. Example, a rectus femoris. And multipinnate, we have multiple sections of our muscle fibers all converging on the same tendon. And of course, that is deltoid, okay? Now, the last one we're going to worry about is called the circular muscle arrangement. Now, I want you to be very careful about this. This is referring to the arrangement in the skeletal system, right? So circular muscle arrangement in the skeletal system. The reason I bring it up is because, of course, smooth muscle also will have circular muscle in there. But that muscle, of course, is involuntary. This muscle is found in the tubes of your body. So your stomach and your blood vessels and these kind of places. That is totally different from this. So remember now, in the skeletal system, circular muscle arrangement is skeletal muscle arranged essentially around in circles. And they're used to voluntarily open and close orifices, openings. Okay? Which is very different from circular muscles in the smooth muscle system. Please do not confuse those two, okay? Anyway, so the circular muscles here, as I said to you, they're arranged, of course, as the name suggests, in circles. But you can see here that they're made of skeletal muscles, and the fascicles are arranged in a circular fashion. But it's not just one long fascicle. You have basically sections or little rectangular wedges of fascicles that are attached to one another to form that circular outline. Now, because of this, it means this circular muscle here, this part here, so, can contract different from this part down here, so, okay? So these two can contract independently to change the shape of the opening that they are around. This is very, very important. Your circular muscle, smooth muscle can't do that. All your smooth muscle, circular muscle can do is contract down and close or relax and open a passage in the body, right? Your circular muscle and skeletal system can contract different sections of itself, causing a partial closing or partial opening at different angles, all right? Why is this important? Okay, you find these kind of muscles, the best example is going to be in your face, okay? This here is F. That's the orbicularis, or I think oris. Oris stands for oral, okay? These are the muscles that make up your lips. Think about as you're speaking, you're contorting your lips to give different shapes, and you're changing the opening to your mouth as you're speaking to change the noise coming out of your mouth to words. So the ability of the circular muscles in the skeletal system to contract differentially, different parts to contract essentially, allows you to form words, right? Now, it would be a lot more amazing if it wasn't for the fact that you have parrots and other birds that don't have lips and they can talk too, right? I mean, obviously not as well, but you know, not too bad considering they have no lips, right? Okay, so that's your circular skeletal muscle for you, right? As it says here, are also called sphincters. They open and close the guard entrances of the body. So the orbicularis oris, example. Also, of course, the anus. That's also another ring of muscle that closes off the passage out of the rectum. And that one, of course, you can also you have some control over, right? So you can relax that one while you're defecating or keep it closed up while you're trying not to defecate because of something you ate earlier, right? Okay. So we've classified skeletal muscles based on their spread of the fascicles, the shape of the muscle, right? Let's now talk more about how the types of movement a muscle can create. I already mentioned to you that your skeletal muscles have to be attached to your skeleton, right? They have to be attached to at least two bones. Remember, one bone is a point of origin which does not move when it contracts. The other bone is a point of insertion, and that one will move when the muscle contracts, right? So let's make sure we don't mix those up, right? Now, as it mentions here, the type of muscle attachment affects power, range, and the speed of muscle movement. All right. Now, just to remind everybody once again, 3 types of muscle. You have skeletal muscle, which is what we're looking at now, because remember, the muscular system only refers to skeletal muscles. And this one is controlled by a central nervous system, and this one is under voluntary control. This is what allows us to move around, right? Cardiac muscle, of course, as you know, is associated with the heart. It is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, of which we have no control. Well, technically speaking, we might not be able to set a speed, but your emotional state does impact your heart. The question is, do you consider emotional state voluntary control? I mean, I wouldn't, right? Then we have smooth muscle, which of course is also controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And this one is also involuntary. Remember I said smooth muscle is found running along the tubes in your body. The stomach, for example, trachea, those kind of places. Small intestine, large intestine. You want to find smooth muscle in the walls of these tubes, and that muscle will be there to help open or close the tubes, right? You have no control over this one. So it mentions peristalsis here, of course, as an example of what smooth muscles do. And as you know, peristalsis is the rhythmic waves of contraction in a tube that is used to push substances along the tube, right? For example, you would have done like bolus at high school when they were talking about swallowing, right? Now, here are the types of responses that a muscle can give. You have a twitch, right? A muscle twitch. I'm sure you've all experienced muscle twitches in your life, right? Basically, you're minding your own business and the muscle just jumps for no apparent reason. That's a twitch, right? So the muscle just jumps out of the blue. You're like, what the heck is going on? Now, as it says here, it is not a normal muscle function. So when you get that twitch, for the most part, you're not controlling that twitch. So it is an involuntary action. It normally means a signal was missent to the muscle or a neuron misfired. So basically, every time you get a muscle twitch, your body made a mistake, right? And considering the number of them people tend to get, your body makes a lot of mistakes. Yeah.
Sorry, that's a question. Is like situations where you're introduced, I'm just talking about a situation, right? Where you're introduced to a lot of flashes. Does that also cause twitch over time?
Flash, are you talking about like light flash?
Yeah. Because it has happened though, but
Yeah, you're thinking about epilepsy.
Oh, okay.
Epileptic seizures. Let me tell you what's going on. Some people, their let's say the neural part of the brain can become overloaded with flashing lights, and it sends a wave of disruptive signals through the rest of the brain and causes signals to be randomly sent to the body from the brain. And since so much of your muscle action is, of course, voluntary, it's controlled by the cerebral cortex. When the cerebral cortex starts randomly firing signals, these signals will rush to your skeletal muscle and cause the person to start twitching and kicking and rolling over. Basically, they have a seizure, right? So A seizure is not really that's not really a twitch per se, but of course it can contain twitches, right? So, for
Yes,
example,
sir.
some people might have very, very mild epilepsy, and actually, flashing lights will cause them to start spontaneously twitching, repeatedly twitch. That happens too, right? I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, no, sir, but I realize it's kind of a different thing, though. But I've been to situations though where like I would just be there sitting down, and so for instance, like somewhere near like the elbow area, I
Mm.
feel like a muscle is jumping, and I'll touch it, and like what's up with that, and it
That's a
just still.
twitch.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've seen it before,
But you
like
said something
thinking,
about flash. So I
oh
thought
no
you,
no, oh like I realized that was something totally different.
oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's the thing. Depending on the angle you had your elbow at, and whether or not you are putting pressure on your elbow, it might actually, remember, there are nerves that run all along there. So you might actually be putting, force on the elbow to trigger the elbow, the nerves to send a random signal. That is also possible. So it might have been how you were situated. But if it's something that
Okay.
happens regularly, it might indicate that there's scar tissue near the nerve. And that kind of bulges out a bit. So when you change the direction, when you change the orientation of your elbow, the scar tissue can press onto the nerve and fire it. So, for example, if people have had like injuries and that have healed, they will have more this problem sometimes, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you have hopefully you've all heard the term tetanus before. At the very least, at CSEC, you'd have heard tetanus as a disease that causes the person to stiffen up and can't move, right? But tetanus is an actual physiological condition which is separate from the disease. The disease was named after the stiffening up, right? But in tetanus, waves of muscle contraction hit a muscle so fast that the muscle contracts, right? And before it can relax again, another signal is sent to the muscle to contract again. So because of that now, the muscle never gets a chance to relax. It's just constantly being sent signals that say, contract, contract, contract. Once again, you've all had a muscle contraction, right? Once again, you're minding your own business, and all of a sudden your calf muscle just start squeeze down. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. You're sleeping peacefully, and then all of a sudden you feel like somebody twist a knife in your calf or something. And when you look down, the calf muscle is just fully contracted, and it's held to get it to relax. That is also tetanus, right? Because once again, your nerves just randomly start firing, shooting impulses down to the calf muscle or wherever that says, hey, contract. The muscle contracts and it tries to relax. Then the next one comes, no, stay contracted and contract and contract. And it stays that way, right? Normally, the best way to overcome this is actually to massage the muscle. You have to press into the muscle with your thumbs and push down on the muscle fibers. And when you do this, you force them to relax, right? And you can overcome the signal being sent. Also, as you do this, you also tend to be massaging near the areas where you're getting the signals from. And that also alleviates the problem, right? So if you ever have like a severe cramp, massaging the muscles is probably the best thing to do. And if the muscle is somewhere that you can't massage, then I'm told hot water bottles work well. So also, for example, women who suffer from painful what do you call it, menstruation, a lot of them will have a hot water bottle, right? Because hot water bottle forces the uterine muscles. As they get warm, the muscles automatically start to relax, right? By the way, this is also one of the reasons why professional athletes, when they are finished competing, assuming the club has money, they will have a cold water bath and a hot water bath. So they just, it's UEFA Cup, just did 90 minutes. The player comes in, They climb into the cold water bath first. Why? Because they're trying to reduce potential swelling in the muscle, right? So the very, very cold water causes the blood vessels to constrict, which reduces the flow of blood to the area, reduces the formation of tissue fluid, so less swelling. Then after they do that, they move into the warm water bath, and the warmness of the bath relaxes the muscles and stops them from getting painful contractions, right? But of course, I don't think I've ever seen that. No, I think maybe there's one setup like that in Jamaica for one of the clubs, but everybody else just have to deal with the twitching, right? But remember, massage, warm compress are the best ways of dealing with dealing with muscle contraction, which is the same as tetanus in the way it behaves, right? Now, what causes muscles to contract? Where does the energy for muscle contraction come from? Now, muscles must require energy to contract. As a matter of fact, a good portion of the food you consume is just used to make energy sources for your muscles to function, right? So, no surprise, I'm sure, to anybody, the major source of energy for muscles and pretty much everything else in the body is going to be ATP, right? And everybody remembers what ATP means, I assume. Adenosine triphosphate, right? Now, in college bio, you would have been told that aerobic cellular respiration is the best way of making ATP, right? That would have been the best way to make ATP. Now, we're not going to run through cellular respiration in this course because you've done it already, right? But you know, for example, that aerobic cellular respiration, a good chunk of it occurs in the mitochondria, right? You know, everybody remembers, I'm sure, about the inner membrane and the outer membrane and all of these things. So I won't bother going into it, right? But everybody hopefully remembers that in aerobic respiration, one glucose molecule gives you 36 molecules of ATP, right? Whereas in anaerobic respiration, you're basically getting 2. So aerobic is by far the better way of getting an ATP, right? Now, muscle fatigue. So you're working, and all of a sudden your muscle gets more and more tired. And if you continue working that muscle, your muscle will go from being fatigued to failing, right? Now, particularly if you're exercising, if you're doing, let's say, weightlifting, because this is very important in weightlifting. When you're lifting weights, right, you're expecting the muscle to get tired. But here's the thing. When you're lifting weights, let's say you're doing a bench press, as you're pressing the weight up and back, you're trying to do your 10 reps, and you're getting more and more fatigued. Why? Because your muscles, in this case over here, your deltoid muscles, your triceps, your biceps. I mean, there's some wrist muscles involved, but we won't worry about those. These muscles are generating force to push the weight away from your chest, right? Now, with every successful push away from your chest, those muscles are burning up their reserves of ATP, right? Then now, there's a reason why the first 2 or 3 pushes aren't so bad, because you have a reserve of ATP in the muscles. Put down weighting on this. So as you're doing the second, third rep now, you're burning up the ATP that is there. You now have to make fresh ATP, which now means you need to take oxygen, take glucose, and use them to make fresh ATP. So as you're working the muscle to rep 4 and rep 5, your mitochondria are busy cranking out ATP to power the muscle. And as this is happening, you're starting to get a buildup of lactic acid, get a buildup of carbonic acid. And these acids reduce the efficiency of the aerobic process. So as you're going along, cranking away, your mitochondria start making less and less ATP because they're being inhibited by the conditions around the muscles. Until eventually you get to the point where you can't produce enough ATP to sustain the activity. So you start to get tired. And the more you work, the more acidic it gets. And the less mitochondria can function. And you get less and less and less ATP. So every rep starts to get harder and harder and harder until eventually you get to the point where you're not making enough ATP to accomplish a rep at all. And the weight simply falls back towards your chest. Hopefully you have a spotter there that can grab it. Otherwise, you and the barbell are about to kiss, right? I hope that makes sense, right? So continuous, constant work will eventually drain the ATP that is powering the muscle faster than you can make it. And then that is when you start to get fatigued, or when you no longer have enough ATP to sustain the movement, your muscle fails, all right? I thought I saw a question there. I could be wrong. Now, once again, talking about exercise, let's talk about types of muscle contraction during exercise. When you have an isotonic contraction, the muscle will contract and shorten, and it will cause a movement to occur. So once again, you're lifting weights, a muscle is moving. You're running, you're jumping, you know, push-ups, sit-ups, all of these things. In order for that body to move, muscle has to contract and shorten to pull the body or the body part in a direction, right? So the muscle contracts, gets shorter, causes movement that is isotonic. So any exercise that causes movement is an isotonic exercise, right? Isotonic exercises are very good for building muscle strength, right? They're also good at building stamina in the muscle. Then now you have isometric exercises. These exercises, the muscle develops tension. So the muscle gets harder, but the muscle does not shorten and there is no movement. So it mentions here, if you take one, if you put your palms together and press hard, you can feel the tension building in your muscles. But of course, your muscles aren't moving, right? Or if you try to push against a wall, right? So you lean forward and push against a wall. Obviously, you ain't gonna move the wall, but you can feel the tensions building up in your shoulder, and the muscle will therefore not be able to shorten because nothing is moving. This kind of exercise is very good at building muscle tone, right? So I don't know if any of you have ever tried yoga as an example, but yoga is very good at building muscle tone. People who do a lot of yoga, you'll notice that they're not very muscular. They look very mager, right? So but unlike people who do isotonic exercises, as I said, they won't put on a lot of muscle, but the muscle tone is better. What do I mean by that? I mean the ability of their muscles to maintain a sustained contraction is much better than that of somebody who is just doing isotonic exercises. So somebody who does yoga can sit on the ground with their legs folded underneath them, not moving for hours and hours at a time without getting back problems. Half of us today, if you sit down at a chair for more than half an hour at a time, your back starts hurt you, right? And if, by the way, if that is happening, it means that your muscle tone is poor, right? If you can't sit upright for 30 minutes, you have poor muscle tone. And you might want to contemplate some yoga. It actually does help, right? All right, so hopefully that makes sense, right? So isometric tones the muscles which means that your everyday muscle use is easier for you. Tone muscles in your back, for example, will reduce back pain, right? It allows you to stand longer, if that's important, right? So it allows you to sustain contractions for extended period of time, right? Whereas isotonic exercises give you bigger muscles that have more stamina, right? For movement. But when I was at high school, we used to get punished in this way. They'd march us out to the field. Everybody would have to hold their hands in front of them, and you're given a brick to hold. Right? So you're standing up straight, arms extended, and here's a brick in your hand. And you have to hold it out in front of you until you are told to put it down. Now, tell me, please, is that, well, assuming we consider that exercise and not torture, is that isotonic or is that isometric exercise? Standing up straight, arms out front, holding a block. Well, it was a brick, not a block, but still. Is that isotonic or isometric exercise?
Isometric.
All right, so you say isometric, Leanna says isometric as well. You're correct. That is an isometric exercise. Now, it might surprise some people to know that the big, thick, heavy guys, the strong ones, the ones who play football and rugby and all that kind of thing, they were terrible at this. Right? Because as strong as they were, their muscles were not designed, well, their muscles were not trained to maintain sustained contraction over a long period of time. So they would get tired quick. Whereas the little Maga gymnastic type ones, you know, they would be fine. Remember, it's the same weight both camps are holding. The same block. But the wingy one them could hold it up longer than the big thick one them. Simply because of the type of exercise that they were doing. Okay? So for example, another good place, if you're a rock climber, for example, isometric exercises are very, very important. Because when you're climbing rocks, sometimes you're hanging in one position, putting all your body weight on a single muscle, which has to hold it for sometimes minutes at a time. So any kind of climbing, you have to have good isometric muscles in order to accomplish them properly, right? All right. Now, we already mentioned this bit about origin and insertion already. Oh, wait, there's a mistake here. Origin is supposed to be the immovable bone, and insertion is supposed to be the movable bone. That's an error there. Okay, it's corrected here though, but it's in error from before. So please make a note of that. The error here. Origin is supposed to be immovable. And insertion is supposed to be movable. Right? Now, I remember muscles once again attached at least 2 points because they have to cause movement. Now, I didn't say it obviously, but I mean, I assume it's obvious that the muscles have to be attached across a joint, right? There must be a joint involved in the muscles. Because if you had a muscle attached to 2 points on the same femur, they're not going to cause the femur to bend. And if it does, you really don't want it to, right? So you have a point of origin. So when we look here, for example, this muscle here is a sternocleidomastoid. Let me just write out the name real quick. Sternocleidomastoid. Now, once again, this is one of these muscles that tells you where it's located. All right? So sterno is sternum. So of course, this is the sternum here. So you have one point of attachment at the sternum. Then you have cloidal, which is the clavicle, which is here. So we have another point of attachment here. So this muscle is attached to two different places on one side, the sternum and the clavicle. The last part of this is the mastoid. And of course, the mastoid is a bone. Basically, it's on the side of your jaw. And look up here, so here is the mastoid bone here. So that's mastoid. Remember, that's clavicle. And that, of course, is sternum. Right? Now, based on the way these muscles are attached, you should be able to tell me which part of the body is going to move. Is the head going to move, or is the neck going to move? Well, actually, both head and neck can move. What I will say is this. Remember now, you're attached at two positions here, one on the sternum, one on the clavicle. So when this muscle contracts, it's going to pull on the sternum and on the clavicle. The joint, of course, that is going to be moving is going to be this here. That is your atlas vertebra. Right? So when the sternocleidomastoid and mastoid contracts, hopefully everybody can see that the head is going to be pulled down and to the side, right? As this muscle contracts this way. So based on how the muscle is attached, you can have an idea as to what movement will be caused by the contraction of the muscle, right? So once again, origin, sternum, and clavicle, insertion, the mastoid bone, and the movement, of course, is going to be, what would you call this? This is like you're looking down onto the side. So I'd call that lateral flexion, right? Maybe partial rotation as well, but we'll see. Now, just to remind everybody again, flexion, you're contracting a body part to move it closer to the rest of the body. So you're causing a reduction in the angle to the body. So for example, if you move your foot from here, so you move your foot from here, so to here, so it means that you've narrowed the angle between your foot and the rest of the body, right? So instead, so you go from basically like this, and the angle becomes this. So the angle becomes more acute. So your foot is now closer to the rest of your body. So that is flexion. And of course, if you straighten your leg, your foot is now further away from the rest of your body. So that is extension. When you raise your arm towards you, up, I should say, your elbow now is closer to your head. So that's flexion. And obviously, if you bend your elbow at the joint and move your hand towards yourself, that is also flexion. Okay? And we mentioned in extension, the angle at the joint is going to increase. So remember, here this is flexion. Here's our joint. The angle here becomes more acute. So you're going from 180 degrees. I mean, all right, let's just call it 90 degrees for the sake of ease. Okay? Extension, the angle increases. So you go from the 90 degrees back to the 180 degrees. Right? Extension, you're moving your hand away from the rest of your body. So you're moving it towards the back. So it's going away, right? Now, there's also something called hyperextension. So let's look at the head here. When you look straight down, you're moving your chin closer to your chest, which means you're flexing the head. When you look straight forward, of course, you're moving your chin away from the rest of your body. So that is extension. Remember the angles, when you look down, the angle between your, well, the angle at your neck joint becomes more acute. So it narrows. When you look up, the angle widens, right? And when you look forward, sorry, not up. When you lean your head back to look up, we call that hyperextension. So why is that not extension? Here's the thing. You have some movements that the body does on a very regular basis. The body is well designed to do these movements. And for the most part, these movements are comfortable, right? So when you look down, it doesn't hurt you. When you look forward, it doesn't hurt you. Have you ever tried to lift up your head and look up for extended periods of time? You can feel the pain in the back of your neck. You can do it, but it hurts. Why does it hurt? Because you're bending the joint at the neck beyond what it is supposed to bend at. Okay? So this is why this is hyperextension. It's hyper because you're moving the joint beyond where it is supposed to go when it extends. So that puts more stress on the joint and will end up with you feeling pain, okay? Now, when police are arresting people, one of the ways you must have seen police shows, right? Where they have people running from the police, fighting the police. They throw them down and they try to handcuff them. And they'll grab the person's arm and they'll pull the arm as far back as they can. Why are they doing that? Is it to make it easy to get the handcuffs on them? No. They're forcing compliance with pain. Because once you extend the arm and then you pull further back, you're hyperextending the arm. So you're now putting pressure on the shoulder joint right here, so. Right? And the pain can be severe. So the police are trying to force you to stop fighting them by putting this tension on the shoulder joint, hyperextending the joint, and you feel it. Right? And it works very well. Right? Though occasionally somebody might get too enthusiastic. I end up pulling the person's arm out of the socket. That does happen. Remember I mentioned to you that the shoulder joint is kind of shallow. And because of that, you can have the glenoid, the head popping out of the glenoid cavity easy when you pull too hard. Then again, you shouldn't be fighting police, so don't feel too sorry for him. All right. So remember, hyperextension, extending beyond the normal parameters of the joint, putting extra pressure on the joint, resulting in pain usually, right? Then now we have abduction, adduction, and circumduction. Now I'm sure you've all heard the word abduct before. And occasionally it'll be on the news about somebody being abducted. So I know you've heard that term before. Then you have the term adduction. Now, if abduct is to kidnap, then to kidnap means to take away, right? So if you're abducting something, you're moving it away from somewhere else, right? In this case here, when you abduct, you move your limbs away from the body. Okay? Here, so you're moving it away from the body. That is abduction. So like when you're doing jumping jacks, when you raise your arms up in the air, you're moving them away from your body. So you have abducted your arms doing a jumping jack. And of course, if you move your arms closer to the body, that is adduction. You know, add like addition. So you're adding your arms nearer to the body. So you're adducting them. So please don't mix up abduction and adduction, please. Right? Two very different things. Then we have circumduction. Now, circumduction is as a result of the glenoid cavity being shallow and the head of the humerus being fairly small. Circumduction occurs at the shoulder. In circumduction, you rotate your shoulder joint so that you cause your arm to form circles. All right. I see people also call it you're windmilling your arm, sort of. So so if you think about it, you just stick your arm all the way out, straighten your fingers, and then think of your fingers as a pen, and use your fingers to draw a big circle in the air. That is circumduction. Okay. Now, most animals cannot circumduct. Human beings are one of the few animals that can do that. Circumduction is extremely important when it comes to climbing, right? It allows you to move your arm in multiple positions, making it easier for you to grab on things as you climb. So you find animals that have evolved to climb will tend to have circumduction well, primates anyway, as a main part of that. So chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas, they can all circumduct. They can reach above their head towards the back, towards the front, to grab onto a tree branch, right? So, of course, human beings which are related to these animals are also going to have that ability, right? I mean, human beings are not the best climbers in the animal world, but at the same time, human beings aren't terrible at it, right? Think about it. Most animals cannot climb at all, right? And if you think about it, some advice that you're given is if you're being chased by an animal, what do? Climb a tree. The more vertical, the better, right? Most of the time, this is sound advice, right? There are some animals, of course, that can climb too. So if you're being chased by a tiger or a leopard, I mean, you know, cats in general and climbing, you have a problem, right? But if you look at the way the cat's shoulder is set up, the cat's shoulder joint allows it a greater range of motion than most four-legged animals, which is why cats can climb so well. So if you look at a dog's shoulder and a cat's shoulder, you see how different the arrangement is because of climbing, right? Anyway, so don't climb a tree to get away from a cat, you will have a problem, right? Then now we have rotation. In rotation, you're essentially twisting a part of your body around an axis, hence rotation. So when you look to the left, look to the right, you're twisting your head left to right, so you're rotating your head. Then now, you can also do the same thing with your forearm. Remember, this part is the forearm, or your foreleg, or just leg, right? So you can stick your arm out, and you can twist so that you have your palm up, or turn so your palm is down. So when you're twisting your palm up and down with your extended arm, you are rotating, right? And you can do the same thing with your ankle joint. You can twist your foot to the left. You can twist your foot to the right. That is also rotation, okay? Now, here are some other kinds of movement that can be caused now by your muscles. Let's see this one here. Let's see how often do you do this one. Inversion. We don't usually do this a lot, but let's say you're walking along through the grass and you step in dog poop. Yeah, well, you step on something, you're squished. You want to know if it's dog poop, what they would normally do? We lift our leg and then turn the sole of our foot inwards towards our body so that we can look at the bottom of our foot to see if there's any poop on the bottom of the shoes. That is inversion. Right? So you're turning your foot medially. Remember, medial means towards the middle of the body, right? As in where your eyes are. So when you turn your foot medially, you turn your foot towards where your eyes are, which is in the middle, right? Then now in inversion, you turn your foot out in the opposite direction. Like, you put on new shoes and you want to see them from all angles. You'll turn your foot laterally outwards so you can see the side of the shoes, which is the part where everybody will see. So you want to see if the side looks nice. That is eversion of the foot. So turning the sole laterally. So you're turning your foot bottom away from your midline, right? So you can see the side of the foot. Then we have pronation. Pronation and supination have to do with your palms. The term pronation, of course, comes from prone. When you are prone, you're lying face down, right? So prone means face down. So pronation must mean something is down too, right? In this case, pronation, your palm is facing down, right? I don't know if you all ever played the slapping game where one person holds their hands like a pyramid in the middle. Another person holds their hands in the air, turn them down, and then you're supposed to slap the other person's hand, and the other person supposed to move the hand out of the way. So when you're holding your hand down, palms down in the air, that of course is pronation as well, right? And when you turn your palms in the other direction, that is supination. So your palms are up, right? Then now we have opposition. Opposition is extremely rare in nature. Human beings are one of the few animals that can do proper opposition, right? One of the few on the planet that can do it. And if you think about what opposition is, it seems so simple. All opposition means is that you can take your thumb and you can use your thumb to touch every other finger on your hand, on the same hand. That's all. Use your thumb to touch every other finger on the same hand. And you're like, what's the big deal about that? Everybody can do it. Almost no animal can. Right? Chimpanzees, which are so closely related to human beings, cannot do this. Orangutans cannot do this. So what is the big deal about this? What is the big deal about being able to touch your fingers? It's very simple. If you can use your thumb to touch your other fingertips, it means that you can form a fist. Most other animals cannot form a fist. Once again, human beings are one of the rare ones. And we've evolved to ensure that when we make a fist, our thumb locks over the index finger and the middle finger when you make a fist. It strengthens the fist, right? So human beings have one of the strongest fists in the animal kingdom because of that. Why is that important? Because you hold stuff. You have a strong grip in comparison to other animals. So being able to make that fist is because of opposition. Because the distance between your index finger and your thumb is long enough that when you curl your fingers in, you can lock your thumb over them to make that fist. Chimpanzees, their index finger and their thumb are also far apart, but much further apart than in humans, which means that when a chimpanzee curls their fingers to make a fist, their thumb actually sits underneath the fingers. So you can't lock it in place. So a chimpanzee's grip is not very strong. It makes up for it by the fact that it is strong enough to beat you to death with his palm with his hand open. Right? So I guess that's something, right? All right. Now, overall, there are about 650 muscles in the human body. Overall, some people are born with more muscles than others. I think I mentioned to you that, for example, some people are born with a muscle, the name escapes me at the moment, that allows them to wiggle their ears, right? So the ability to wiggle your ears is actually genetic. Either you're born with a gene that is responsible for making that muscle or not, right? So if you happen to be able to wiggle your ears, then you have 651 muscles. All right. As I say, they enable us to move, maintain posture, generate heat, right? The liver and the skeletal muscles are the major organs generating heat in the body. We're going to study some of the muscles. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to remember all 650 muscles. That would be a bit much. I mean, it wouldn't hurt still, if I'm honest. But that would probably be a bit much. That said, I'm going to expect you to know at least 50 muscles. So 50 out of 650 can't be that bad, right? And some of them, I know you know already. So it will not be that bad. All right. Let us start with this one here, which we did already. So you should already be familiar with this muscle. You can see here this muscle is the sternocleidomastoid, which I mentioned earlier. Sternocleidomastoid. Sterno, remember, because it's attached to the sternum, and cleido because it's attached also to the clavicle, and mastoid because it's attached to the mastoid bone, right? So when this one contracts, it pulls on the mastoid bone, which moves the head. So as it says here, it flexes and rotates the head. So it pulls the head down, as in the flex, and it can rotate the head by moving it inwards, right? So for example, if this part of the muscle here contracts strongly, the head gets pulled down and then towards the sternum. If this part contracts instead strongly, head simply gets pulled down. Okay? So sternocleidomastoid causes flexion and rotation of the head. So notice here, I am telling you the muscle name. I am telling you the motion the muscle causes. All right? Which obviously means I need both of these. Then we have our masseter muscle. Our masseter muscle helps us to masticate. So masseter, masticate. What does masticate mean? It means crush your food, right? So if you notice the position of this muscle here, we have an origin, right? That's the zygomastic bone right here. Essentially, it sits here in the cheek, or a zygomastic bone. And our insertion is on the mandible. Now, just based on where this muscle is situated, I know you can tell me what this muscle does, right? Obviously, if the origin is essentially on the cheekbone, zygomastic bone, when you have an insertion, it's on the mandible. When the muscle contracts, it's going to raise or elevate the mandible. So it pulls the mandible up. That's like when you're closing your mouth. So you're taking a bite. So it elevates the mandible. It pulls the mandible up, right? Then we have the temporalis bone. And of course, hammer bone, temporalis muscle. And of course, it's called that because it is in the temporalis region of the skull. So its point of origin is the temporalis region of the skull. And then the insertion now, obviously, I'm assuming everybody realizes that this is a convergent muscle, right? You can all see that, right? So here is our tendon, and our tendon comes in and also attaches to our mandible. So what kind of motion does this cause? It can elevate and retract the mandible. So it can pull the mandible up and back, right? Now this bone is particularly important when you're grinding the food, because when you're chewing, you push, you pull, you close the mouth down on the food, so that's up. Then you pull your jaw back to grind the food between your teeth. So the temporalis muscle is very important for chewing. Now, a fact that you might find interesting is that human beings have very small temporalis muscles in comparison to other primates, right? So a chimpanzee, I always go back to chimpanzee because those are the ones we normally think about. A chimpanzee can easily bite through somebody's wrist, okay? Now think about it. Chimpanzee, mostly fruits, leaves, that's what they're eating. But their temporalis muscle is so large. If your hand get in their mouth, it coming off, right? Half it can barely bite through a chicken bone. So why are the temporalis muscles of a chimpanzee so much stronger than that of a human? And our diets are not dissimilar? Well, our diets are very dissimilar. Chimpanzees eat all their food raw, right? So if you're eating fruits and nuts and leaves, nuts can be very tough, right? Green fruit can be very tough. So they need strong muscles to bite through their vegetable prey. Also, some people don't realize this. Chimpanzees also eat a fair amount of meat as well. They're not obligate herbivores. They're essentially omnivores. But they lean heavily on the vegetation. So chimpanzees will get together as a group and they'll hunt other animals. Just like how humans will hunt, chimpanzees will hunt too. Kill animals, tear them to pieces, and they'll eat them. All right? It does not happen all the time, but it happens often enough that, you know, if you get attacked by a chimpanzee, he's going to eat a piece of you. It is what it is, right? Now, humans picked up a recessive gene so at some point in our history. This is hundreds of thousands of years ago. And that gene caused the temporalis muscle to shrink in human beings. So we picked up a defective gene in the human line that caused the shrinking of the temporalis muscle. Now, this is important because when that temporalis muscle shrank, it allowed the size of our skull to increase. So having a smaller muscle attached to the skull allowed the skull to expand. And when you expand the skull, there's all of a sudden more space for brains. So that mutation allowed human beings to increase their intelligence. So from these little things, human beings are created, right? So your ancestors picked up what to them would have probably seemed like a bad mutation at the time, but that the mutation allowed them to evolve a bigger brain. Anyway, temporalis muscle, very important for chewing. It pulls the mandible up and back, as in when you're grinding your food, right? Then now we have the trapezius muscle. These muscles here are, of course, at your shoulder, right? Now, let's see here. So that's your trapezius muscle here. You can see it runs all the way up into the neck, right? Now you can see how broad the muscle is. It runs all along the vertebral column. And then you can see here the tendon runs across the shoulder joint here. Okay? So that's tendon there. And this, of course, here is tendon as well, attaching that muscle to your rib cage. Well, to your vertebrae at the back. Now, just by looking, you should be able to work out where is origin, where is insertion. Right? You should be able to figure which one of these two areas, A or B, you're most likely going to have movement in. That's right, B and B, A and B, right? So think about it for a moment and then I'll show. So which one of these positions are you going to get movement in? Is it A bone, A joint, I should say, or the B joint, right? I would ask individuals with this habit in mind for when we show the movement, right? Are you going to move here or are you going to move here? Trapezius extends, adducts, or elevates the scapula. This is the scapula, of course, right here. Right? So this muscle here attaches to the scapula. So when the trapezius contracts, it pulls on the scapula. And because of how broad the muscle is, another convergent muscle, it can pull towards the top part of the muscle, middle, or the back part of the muscle. Therefore, you can get multiple movements. And because the muscle is also attached to the head, you can also have an effect on the head. So when it contracts, it can extend the head. So when you look down, this muscle helps to lift your head so you can look forward, right? When you shrug your shoulders, what do? You raise your scapula, you let them fall back. So that's your shoulders we're talking about. So normally here, you lift your shoulders, or we mean you're moving your scapula. So it allows you to raise your scapula, right? So it elevates the scapula or it pulls it back down. So it depresses the scapula, right? So all of these are coming from the trapezius muscle, right? So keep that in mind. Extends the head, because of course it's attached to the back of the skull. It adducts, elevates, or depresses the scapula because it's attached to multiple parts of the scapula and is a convergent muscle we're dealing with here, right? Then now we have the latissimus dorsi, or if you do gym stuff, you'll hear them talk about the lats, right? This is the muscle they refer to as the lats, latissimus dorsi. As you can see here, this is a significantly large back muscle. And if you notice once again, we have multiple muscle fibers converging at a single point. But notice where this point is going now. It's going towards the shoulder, right? And so it's an insertion is in the shoulder. The origin is once again running along the spine. This point here is the lower back part of the spine, right? So what movement does this cause? Remember, the insertion is in the shoulder, right? It extends, adducts, and rotates the arm medially. So remember, if you extend the arm, what direction you're moving it in, right? Adduct, you're moving the arm closer to the side of the body. Rotate. Rotation is like when you're reaching across your shoulder. Let's say you have something in your right hand and you want it. You reach over towards your right hand with your left hand to take it out of your right hand. That is rotating your shoulder medially. So when you're reaching across your body with your hand, you're rotating your shoulder medially when you do that. Okay? Then we have the deltoid muscle. The deltoid muscle now, as I'm sure you can see here, sits over your shoulder. All right? So it's going to be attached to the scapula at one end, and then it goes all the way down until it attaches to the humerus on the other side. So humerus here, scapula here. So obviously, this part is its origin. And that part down there is the insertion. All right. Now, what kind of movement will this cause? Remember, the deltoid is a multi-pennate muscle. It has large sections with fairly heavy muscle, which will cause movement, of course, in those sections. So it's going to cause movement in multiple directions. So we have abducts. So when the deltoid contracts, it moves the arms laterally at the side. So it moves the arms laterally away from the body. That's abduction, right? The teeth in the arm. Then you have flex. So you can flex your arm, which once again means you're moving it closer to the body. So remember, this is dependent on the part of the deltoid that is contracting, right? So the top part is contracts. So if here contracts, for example, you're going to abduct the arm, you're going to raise the arm away from the side of the body. Whereas if you contract the bottom part down here, you can flex the arm by moving it closer to the body, right? Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, right? So it flexes and extends the arm depending on the part of the muscle that contracts. It can also abduct the arm, which means to move the arm away from the body, right? Then now we have the pectoralis major, which is a muscle we looked at earlier. If you notice here, the pectoralis major is attached to the sternum, right? And then goes over and then attaches itself down on the humerus. So the pectoralis major is going to cause movement in the humerus. So it flexes, abducts, and rotates the arm medially. So once again, flexing, you're bending at the joint, right? In this case, you have the shoulder joint. Adducts, you're pulling the arm closer to the body from the side. Rotates medially, you're reaching across the body to pick up something, right? Then now we have the biceps brachii. Remember, these biceps brachii muscles are going to be parallel muscles. So for the most part, the parallel muscles can only cause one real movement, right? So when the parallel muscles contract, it's going to flex the elbow joint. Now I just want to mention this here, why it's called the biceps. By, of course, 2, right? So biceps 2, then you have brachii, as in brachial region of the arm. Brachial region of the arm, of course, is the front of the arm. So it's called the biceps because there's 2 points of origin. So you have an O here and another O here. Okay? So 2 points of origin across the shoulder joint. You can see it's attached to the sternum. Okay? Then the muscle itself runs down the length of the forearm and attaches itself to its insertion point, which is on the radius. Right? So when this muscle contracts, it pulls on the bones in the forearm and pulls them closer to the body. Hence, it flexes the elbow joint. So flexes the elbow joint. Then now, of course, we have the triceps brachii. At CSEC, you would have been told that the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii are what we call antagonistic muscles. And of course, with any antagonism, you're working against each other, right? So that means, of course, if the biceps brachii is going to flex the forearm, the triceps brachii is going to want to do the exact opposite because, of course, they are in opposition. So it should come as no surprise that the triceps brachii extends the joint elbow or the forearm, if you prefer. So the biceps flexes the forearm triceps extends the forearm. We already spoke about why biceps is bi. So why is the triceps tri? It's going to obviously have 3 points of origin. Okay? So triceps brachii has 3 points of origin. Now, the insertion of the triceps now is on the ulna. So, of course, when the triceps brachii contracts, it pulls on the ulnar bone, causing the angle to increase between the elbow joint, which means you're extending the joint, right? Okay. Rectus abdominis. So rectus towards the front, and abdominis, of course, abdomen, right? So what is towards the front of the abdomen? This muscle. This muscle helps to flex the abdomen. So for example, if you've ever done a crunch, and then lie down and flatten your back, put your knees together, and you lean yourself towards your knees, at least you try to touch your knees, that is a crunch, and that is abdominal flexion. So when you flex, you're doing a crunch. Now look where the muscle runs. See, it's running on either side of your navel, right? Here's a little navel. Here are the muscle blocks that make up the rectus abdominis. Right, and then it runs all the way down to connect to the pelvic bone and all the way up to connect to the sternum, okay? So rectus abdominis. Then now we have the external obliques. By the way, I should also mention the rectus abdominis is what they call the six-pack. Why is it a six-pack? We have 3 sections of muscles on this side, and of course, 3 more on that side. So of course, when the guy takes off the shirt, or the girl takes off her shirt, whatever, you're going to see these 6 distinct muscles or sections of muscle really on the abdomen, hence it's called a six-pack, right? Now there's also something called an 8-pack. If you're very well fitted out, you will also cause the external oblique muscles to look very prominent. So those are the ones sitting at the side, just above the hips, right here. So sometimes when they're exercising, those muscles also get big and bulgy. So you end up now with what they call the 8-pack. So you have 8 obvious muscles in the abdominal region. Now, this muscle here, the external oblique, his main job is to compress the abdomen. So it's not there to help you bend over or do a crunch. It is there to squeeze down on the abdomen to increase pressure in the abdominal cavity, right? So that one is your external oblique, which makes up your 8-pack if you're into exercise, right? And by the way, I should mention, this muscle is very hard to, it's very, very hard to actually train. So most people with 6-packs will not develop an 8-pack, right? And honestly, normally to get the 8-pack, what people will do is that they'll drastically drop weight, so the muscle shows up more clearly instead of trying to make it bigger by exercise, right? And so you can see some scrawny people with a 6-pack and an 8-pack, you're like, wow, but they're weak as dishwater, right? Anyway, now we have external intercostals, and you are familiar with these, of course, already from when we were doing respiratory system. You know, these muscles raise or they elevate and push your rib cage out. So it's up and out. So that's external intercostal muscles. They are attached to the outside of the ribs. Hence, they're external, right? So they're not flexing, they're not extending, they're elevating your rib cage. Now, internal intercostal muscles, of course, would be on the inside of the rib cage. And their job is now to pull the rib cage in, as you know. So when you're breathing out, they're there to help to force the air out by compressing the chest cavity. Right? So they depress the rib cage. That's what I mean when I say they pull it in, right? Diaphragm, this is another one you know as well, right? This one, as you know, sits at the border between the thoracic cavity and the abdomen. Your lungs are attached to this one superiorly, right? The diaphragm, of course, as you know, contracts, pulls down, increases the volume of your chest cavity. So this is an inspiratory muscle. So it contracts and pulls down. Remember, it goes from dome shape to being flat, increasing the volume in your chest cavity, right? Now, we also have forearm muscles. And remember, these muscles are extremely important because they allow for the manipulation of things using our fingers. Okay? So they're super, super important muscles. Now, we already did extensor digitorum. And as you know, the extensor digitorum allows you to open your fingers or your palm, right? So what about your flexor carpi? Now, once you see carpi, hopefully you think of carpals, right? And of course, your carpals are what? Your wrist bones, right? So if you have flexor carpi, what does it do? It's going to flex your wrist bones. It's a flexor, it's flexing carpals, hence flexor carpi. Then, of course, if you see another muscle called an extensor carpi, you know what that one does. It's an extensor, which means it must extend something. What is it extending? The carpi. It literally says so, right? So you should be able to pick up, just from the name, exactly what these muscles are doing, okay? Flexor digitorum and extensor digitorum, of course, we spoke about already. Now, obviously, this muscle here, which is called the pronator, it is going to pronate. It is going to turn your palm face down, hence pronation, okay? That one should be easy. And of course, a supinator is going to turn your palm face up. Nice and easy to remember, right? This one is another one of these muscles that most people know the name of. The gluteus maximus, which is the major muscle in the buttocks. So it's the major butt muscle. It's also one of the biggest muscles. Well, it's the biggest muscle in the body. The reason this muscle is so big is because when you're walking, this is a major muscle associated with your ability to walk. So it has to bear the weight of your body as you're moving around. Hence, it's a big, heavy muscle. Can be very thick. Not everybody has a thick gluteus maximus. That's just life, right? So what does it do? It can extend and rotate the thigh. Remember when I say the thigh, I'm talking about the femoral region. So when you're going to take a step, you need to be able to move your femoral region, right? So it extends and rotates. So you can stick your foot out and then move it to the side. You know, like a roundhouse kick. It rotates the thigh laterally. You can once again turn your leg towards the outside, right? Then you have the rectus femoris, which you spoke about already. Rectus is towards the front. And of course, it runs down the femur. Hence, rectus femoris. What does this one do? It flexes the thigh. So it moves the thigh, which of course is the femoral region, up closer to the body. And it can extend the lower leg. So it allows you to kick, basically, right? All right, this is, we'll do this one for the last one. The gracilis muscle now as you can see, is running along the inner thigh. Okay? And this one adducts and flexes the thigh. So adductor force, remember, you move the thigh closer to the body, and flexes, you help to raise the leg, right? Or raise the thigh, I should say, right? All right. I'll leave the rest for tomorrow. And we should move on from this to microscopic aspects of the muscle. If I haven't posted it on Canvas yet, I will do so tonight. All right, it's 2:48, so we'll stop here. All right, folks. So have a good rest of your day. We will speak again tomorrow.